Welcome to The Chat. This is a podcast from the team at Glasgow City Mission, the first and the granddaddy of the global city mission movement. I'm Charles Maasz, proud to be CEO at this time. This series is intended as a resource and a point of connection for anybody interested in the work that goes on at Glasgow City Mission. I want to speak to people whose passion, vocation, career, faith journey, or life aligns with an aspect of the work and the rhythm of what we do. Many will have a faith perspective, some will not. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Please check out our website, our social media platforms. Click like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and add us to your favorites. Feedback is welcome, but please keep it clean, keep it civil. Thank you. Wade Thompson's with us today. Wade is known to many, I think, with the Glasgow City Mission. To my shame, I don't think I knew either Wade personally or of Wade sufficiently, but I soon came to know that you'd been involved with us for years, if not decades, I think, in various different capacities as friend, supporter, volunteer, staff, bank staff, kitchen help, all of it. So you know this setup better than me, I would say. And yeah, and today, in your role with Vital Church Ministry, I thought it would be nice to talk to you about your role with them, about your role with us, and obviously we've been having conversations off camera, off recording, around the role of the Glasgow City Mission's position within the context of the local church in Glasgow, and about the work that we do around the city anyway. So I'd be very curious. My cup of tea. Thank you very much, man. And the Star Wars mug. Look at that.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. So Wade, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick rundown of where you came from, how you came to be in Glasgow, what connected you with the Glasgow City Mission, and then we'll just take you from there and see where it goes.
Absolutely. First of all, hey, thanks for having me. It has been a pleasure to your name has been thrown around, and obviously heading up the city mission the last few years, I've known of you, but we've just haven't crossed paths since recently. And then yesterday we got the pleasure of chopping vegetables and sorting out Christmas dinner for a bunch of folks, which was some great conversations, and I wish we'd have been recording then. That would have been good.
Yeah.
Some just great fellowship and conversation and fun. It was, I really enjoyed it. But so I won't go back. I originally come from the United States. Grew up in the state of Arkansas, and for those that don't know where that is, it's in the middle. They consider us a flyover state. We're just northeast of Texas. So if you're looking at a map of the United States, if you're looking straight at it, you're probably looking right at Arkansas, home of Bill Clinton and Johnny Cash. So that's a few famous faces, you bet. And depending on who you are, you may lean more to one than the other. So, but yeah, and I spent, before coming to Scotland, I spent about 8 years as a whitewater raft guide. And I was just traveling all over the States, rafting and chasing whitewater and taking people down rivers and working for different companies in different states and things like that. So loved it, but definitely had we kind of used to jokingly say it was a rock and roll lifestyle without any talent. So that was kind of what it was. And I really enjoyed the hours on the river, but all of the other stuff that was involved, the politics with companies, the making no money, just the lifestyle starts to, the drinking and all that kind of stuff really starts to wear on you. And so it was towards the end of the turn of the last century and around the 2000 marks, I really just felt like God was starting to kind of beckon and call me back. I grew up in the church, grew up going to the First United Methodist Church in Harrison, Arkansas. And I would have continued to always call myself a Christian, but my lifestyle was probably in many ways not matching up with that. And so there was just an uneasy and an unrest going on. And My dad was at the time kind of hanging out with, in September 2001, just before 9/11. My dad had been that year hanging out with an old country preacher back in Arkansas. And I'd gotten a phone call to come home and visit my grandfather. He was unwell and probably going to pass away soon. And so, I was living in Maine at the time, and got the call to come and visit because he's probably going to pass. So I did. But during that time, my dad had decided that he'd been hanging out with this old country preacher and listening to the gospel and doing Bible studies, and decided it was time to get baptized, which was really cool. And so I went home, and as part of that trip home to visit my granddad, my dad was baptized, and there was a whole group of us that got together, a family, and we went down to there's something right out of Brother O'Warthout, to be honest with you. So went down to the river to the baptism hole.
Bluegrass baptism.
Bluegrass baptism. That is
Love it.
that is it. And so my dad was baptized, and we were all there. And then, of course, Eldon King was the guy that did it. He was at the time probably 88, 90 years old, something like that. And he just said, if there's anybody here, today is the day of salvation, right? If anybody is here and want to dedicate their life and just and be baptized, this is it. And so, amazingly enough, my mom stepped up, my brother stepped up, and I stepped up, and it was just real, like I was in the Methodist church. Of course, I was sprinkled as an infant, but this was really just a moment where our family as a whole, there's a corner turned, and our family decided that following Jesus with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength all the days of our lives, whatever it takes, whatever the cost was what we were going to do. And so, and it certainly was for me. And so that was 2001. At that time, man, it was just a few years of exploring what that was going to look like and mean. And to kind of make a longer story longer, it led me to this discipleship training, missionary training opportunity that was through an organization called Church Resource Ministries at the time. It's now called Novo. And they had a training center school here in Glasgow. And so I applied and got accepted. It spent another, my final year rafting that summer, and then jumped on a plane and moved to Scotland. Was only supposed to be about 12 months in September 2004. So, spent a year kind of in this discipleship training program. And during that year, there was one of the staff guys had a heart for planting a church. And so was part of the lead plant team, if you will, for Rehope Next Generation Bible Church here in Glasgow. And it was during that first year, in fact, yesterday, so we're recording this just before Christmas, and
17th.
Yesterday was, yesterday was we did all the Christmas dinners and stuff for the Glasgow City Mission, and that was my 16th anniversary to the day with the Glasgow City Mission. So my first day at the mission was during a Christmas service, and my eyes were like deer in the headlights and couldn't believe what was going on. Not only just the level of quality of food that was going out, but the love and just the extravagance that was going on as everybody chipped in to serve the people of the city. And it was just, at that time it was just completely chaos and wonderful. And I just couldn't, it was like, I just asked the question, is it like this every night? And what have I gotten myself into? But was hooked. And so it was definitely the adjustment to, homelessness or, poverty, if you will, in a urban setting was very new to me. Growing up in a rural hillbilly of Arkansas, poverty looks very different. And so this was just a new experience and one that I fell in love with the people. And it was a really steep learning curve for language acquisition.
Yes.
And it was, but loved it. So and now working over the years have transitioned to working with an organization called Vital Church Ministry. And I serve it as an intentional pastor, intentional interim pastor, and we revitalize churches in transition or crisis. And so as an organization, we're invited into a church that finds themselves somewhere on that spectrum of transition or crisis. Not all transition is crisis, but certainly can be. And we then pastor churches through that and help them get back to a place of vitality and intimacy with God is really what we through the gospel is really what we strive to do. So anyway, that's feels like that was a long answer to a simple question, but
no, it's not a simple question, and it wasn't particularly long, but it does raise a lot of questions. So first of them is, how did you connect? How is it you came to connect with Glasgow City Mission? Because at that stage, we were a significantly smaller outfit in a different building. And so how did that connection come to be? Was that through the college course that you'd come to Scotland to partake in? Or was that through Rehope, or how did that happen?
So the guys that were the training on this course, they just pulled us aside. And so the whole part of this course was just not just part of it was discipleship training. Part of it was, seminary-esque. And then there was obviously the mission aspect that we had moved to a new city and were looking to engage in the community. And so one of the guys, Tim McDonald, who's still a dear friend and mentor of mine, he really challenged us to he kind of pulled us aside and says, it's time to challenge yourself and to step outside of your comfort zone. And so, for those that maybe had been involved in youth ministry, well, you could do youth ministry, but really kind of encourage people to step out of their comfort zone and do something that maybe they hadn't done. And I think the reason is that tends to it's that foxhole that the Spirit of God really kind of meets and empowers and connects with us. And you're just so reliant on him because you have no idea what you're doing. And so there was another guy on our team that had just started, Stephen Irwin had just started volunteering, I think a few weeks before. And he'd kind of shared a little bit about it. And I said, that sounds pretty awesome. And so I, got in touch with Ewan and the relative process to go through to volunteer. And it just so happened that they needed a few extra faces on the Christmas night. And it happened to be a Wednesday. And so Wednesday night, and that crew on a Wednesday night happened to be my crew that I stayed with for years. And pretty faithfully until probably 4 or 5 years ago. I've been a little bit more hit and miss just due to the nature of the work. And here recently I was serving in a church down in England. And so I was kind of traveling a lot. And so it just wasn't possible, but it's been kind of cool to get back. But that was the initial connection, and just loved it. Not only just the night work, but they had during the week, we had a young men's group, and we would do outings and take guys out and about, whether just go have a barbecue in the park or go golfing or go-karts or something like that. And so I really, not only with just the craziness of the evening service, but then I just really felt like, I appreciated that. It was a kind of a connection and just serving a practical need. But then most of the daytime work was really where the deeper connections could be made. And the night stuff was really just to funnel into relationship during the day. And I really appreciated that. And plus that's where I really enjoyed was the connecting to the young men and being able to actually spend one-on-one time with and go deeper and kind of experience them and just get to know them better. And so that was part of the work that I really, really appreciated as well.
Right. And so the connection then between the church, the college, your city mission volunteering and the work that you were doing with us, how did any of that end up with you getting involved with Vital Church Ministries and this particular brand of ministry that you're involved in?
That's a great question. My computer has just, you're going to have to forgive me for here for a minute. I've just gotten
Yeah.
a bunch of, can you still see me?
Yeah. See you fine,
Okay.
hear you fine. It's just
All right.
wobbly when you touch it, but it's not an issue for us at all.
Okay. There you, okay. You're back.
And
For
one of
some
the things
reason.
I think about this is that I wouldn't want to watch two guys just shooting breeze. I would happily listen. Like yesterday, I listened to
Yeah.
the guy from Gas Monkey Garage. Have you seen that
Oh
guy
yeah.
on Discovery? I've forgotten his name. Can't believe it. Anyway, he makes me laugh. He's outrageous. He's a bit rude. I'm not recommending him to anybody out there that's a believer because, you might think less of me. But hey, he's funny. And he was talking to Joe Rogan, and they, over the course of 4 hours, were just talking and getting progressively more and more drunk. We have tea. I didn't watch that because to me that would be dull. I think watching for two guys, even if they're funny guys, having a chat, not good viewing. I imagine
Yeah.
some might watch it on a YouTube channel, but more likely, if you're going to listen to this, you'll be listening to this.
Yeah.
Maybe you're driving or something. So you wobble in that, you wobble ahead. It don't matter.
Sorry. I think we're back now. It just kind of threw me off. Okay. Re-ask your question.
Yeah. The question is in this sort of, in the triangulation between, say, your missional work, Glasgow City Mission, volunteering, working, and the establishment of Rehope Glasgow.
Yep.
And the college course, your mentors. Was any of those three lines of journey anything to do with connecting you up with Vital Church ministry? Because it's quite a unique but yet necessary area of ministry. And how did that happen?
I had a heart for, we were church planting, and that's over the last probably 10 or 12, 20 years, maybe, has been a real buzzword and a real focus towards planting new churches and new expressions of church. And I'm a fan. I'm all for it. But I also felt like there was it seemed that a lot of folks that run in that stream, one of the things that they excel at is kind of putting down the traditional church or the existing church and pointing out all the scabs and wounds and there's an underappreciation for the 2,000 years of church history that have got us to this place. That we are where we at on the shoulders of the church. I think we have to be careful how we talk about the church. It's the bride of Christ. If someone was to talk about my bride, Victoria, who's from Belfast, and is why I'm probably stuck here for a while. But if people should probably be careful how they talk about my bride. And I would get pretty defensive, and so. Yeah, I think we just need to be careful. Anyway, all that to say, also just kind of being new to the UK and to Scotland, and as I got to know pastors and preachers in Glasgow, and began, as I grew in ministry and stuff, began to kind of pulpit fill in some places that didn't have pastors and were looking, and maybe had been looking for 3, 4, 5, 6 years for someone to fill that role. My heart just continued to break for the church here in the UK, the historic church, if you will, and still have a heart and passion for church, believe church planting, but just my heart was really breaking for the existing churches. And in fact, we pulled together a Bible study group with some local pastors here in Glasgow. That was it was amazing. For like 7 years, we would get together every week at Starbucks, and we were reading through the Bible together year after year, and just coming together, and just realized that there's few times when a lot of these smaller churches that, the pastor, if he's in a Bible study, he's leading it. If he's studying the Bible, it's for the purpose of preaching or for somebody else. If he's praying, it's leading prayer. That there wasn't a whole lot of space for, pastors just to get together with peers and say, you know what, I don't know that I understand this, or this has really kind of struck me personally, and it wasn't a study for the purpose of teaching or for, it was self. And we were able to get, ministers and pastors from different backgrounds and denominations, and we could rib each other. It was a safe place to kind of give each other a hard time about you know baptism modalities, but we weren't gonna hurt each other's feelings over it, or it was just not what was the most important. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it was just a really blessed time. And so 2010, the organization that I was kind of with at the moment, at the time, we had a worldwide staff conference. During that staff conference, there was a guy by the name of Dave Maasz. Vital Church was part of the same parent organization that we were kind of under.
What was this organization, and what was that in 2010?
At the time, it was called Church Resource Ministries.
Yeah.
And it has since changed its name to Novo, Novo. And they've got, I think, about, what did I see? Over 550 missionaries in like 220 or 126 countries around the world. So really church focused, leadership development, gospel focused organization that's really doing some pretty neat and unique things. And so Novo is kind of is a parent organization that has some different streams within that. And so our team here in Glasgow was kind of under that organization as a kind of an individual stream. And then so was this organization called Vital Church Ministries. Had lunch with a guy by the name of Dave Maasz, who was the founder and kind of heads up Vital Church in the United States. And he just kind of talked about what they do, revitalizing churches in transition or crisis, and through a process that is theologically rooted in Bible, in the Bible, and through a gospel-centered approach. And there was just something about that was just like, I feel like we need that here in Scotland. We need that in the UK. And a few months passed, and I was like, I kind of got in touch with him, said, I'd really like to give this a shot. So you can either watch me crash and burn, or you can help me out a little bit. And he was gracious enough. Him and his team really poured in time and resources, came over and did some training with us, and really has worked with us over the years, and still very much a part of, very much part of them. And they have made the travel back and forth many times as we engage with churches and want to see churches vitalized for sure. So that was the connection with them, and just fell in love with it. And I do think it is for the first several years, people thought that, you're crazy. Why would you want to desire, have a heart for, get excited about going into some potentially disastrous situations within churches? That's why people flee churches. And those are the things that, I don't know, there's just something weird. They kind of get excited. It's like, why don't you just go church plant, start something new? And interestingly, usually those people that say that are people that have been wounded by the church. And so they're ready to kind of jump and start something new from the ground up. And they think they can avoid all of those issues that are in the church. So.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I think it makes me think immediately of the people who, let's just use an example of statistically, if you're from a broken home,
sure,
chances are that you will, although you will try not to, you are likely to be deeply programmed in a way that you don't comprehend, and probably statistically will replicate the tragic errors of your history. I wonder how many of the people who are wounded and then go on to start the new thing, because we're going to create a new family which is going to be more perfect than the one we've come from, which was broken, but end up actually just recreating a similar mess to the one that they left. I'm guessing that that's just basic human development, human psychology, and human behavior that we failed to learn, actually. what reconciliation looks like often, fail to deal with the foundational messes that create our lenses in order that we can actually be restored in relationship with people, and then break the cycle of hurt and pain and all of those things. And I'm sure you must see that then in your role.
Yeah, I mean, I think we quickly can forget that the issues that we see in church are rooted in sin. And I think we're kidding ourselves that if we go start a new church or whatever, that we're not bring, I mean, we're going to crawl out of our gutter and crawl right back into, like we're going to bring sin, like, because we're a work in process, right? And so we're going to bring our junk into any situation or process. And so even if starting a new church, just as people come, they're bringing their own baggage and sin into that situation that Jesus is in process of working through. And so whatever those shortcomings are, they're gonna, you can't run away from them. So there's, and that's one of the things in doing this work is that, how much we have to recognize that, that, I mean, Vital Church is not the savior of a church or an organization. We're all we can do is point people to the one who is, and that's really what we try to do. And we have to be real aware of our own shortcomings and mistakes, and I think as leaders, then own those and be willing to go, you know what, I blew it here, and own those mistakes. And I think there's maybe not enough of that going around these days. And so it's refreshing when leaders do that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm thinking about how we at the City Mission bring and draw to ourselves people whose fractures and challenges mean that they can't progress as long as they are, let's say, and they may be right to blame others, but as long as they're focused on it not being their own issue, it's someone else. There's a basic impasse there. You can't get beyond it until you're prepared to say, actually, I have a role to play in all of this and in the reparation of all of this. So there's a Lord who says, I'm forgiven, and now I need to forgive much. And then you work in that basis of saying what is hidden in here, that I'm not even conscious of what is hidden here. But unless it is exposed to the light, it can't be redeemed. And I will continue to make a mess until I have the courage to allow that to be exposed and burned off, if necessary, by the light of God, and then trust that what is remained and retained is of value, and then walk forward as a new creation, right? So we have that, and you've seen that at the City Mission. And what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking about while you're speaking is that same process is necessary for a fellowship that is going through some degree of trauma, hurt, pain, and in need of reconciliation. So how does one, and I'm guessing it'll be different for every situation, right? Of course, but there must be a general principle of, you use the word sin, but there must be a way of taking a fellowship and saying, actually, do you know what? If you want to break the cycle of this thing, if you want to move on to the bright future that you all envisage, if you want the hope of the glorious tomorrow that brings you back every week, then actually there's some stuff in here that we need to bring into the light. That you need to own some stuff and actually not blame the person or woman who's left. But actually, what are you going to do, team, to make your future with the new leader, new pastor, better? How does one go about doing that when often church leadership is full of very motivated, very capable, very able, and often quite successful people in their own right, whilst the principles are the same between the missions work and what you're talking about? You're addressing different people. What's the process of getting people to look at themselves in that way, in that degree of honesty?
Yeah. Such a great question. And I think it's, in so many ways, it ties so much into what you guys are doing. On a personal level with people, and it's helping, at the city mission level, and with all of us, it's the issues that we have on a day-to-day basis, like, and this is true for churches, that the presenting issues are never the real issue. There's always something deeper. And so you have someone that walks in off the street on, tonight at the mission, homelessness or whatever has brought them in through that door in the evening. That's a symptom.
Mhm.
It's not the core root issue. It is a symptom of something else. And that could be, who knows what the foundation of. And so to really, to your point, to really help a person move forward, or to make real progress and move forward, is not just, I mean, you can, and unfortunately we know the situation in this type of work where, like I was there last night and saw some faces that I've seen for 16
Yeah.
years. It's the same faces, and it's the same connections. And so but unless the root issue is dealt with, the systemic root issue, whatever that is dealt with, then it's really tough to make any kind of forward real progress. And so with a church, the process is the same. I guess, to use another analogy, is that my wife and I bought a house here recently, and it's a total fixer upper, and it needs everything done. And so in the master bedroom, there's some plaster falling off of one of the walls. And so you could say, oh, well, there's plaster falling off the wall. That's an issue. We just need to replaster that. Well, that's fine if it was the root issue. So if you go up into the attic, you realize that there's a puddle of water on the floor there that is dripping. Oh, so there's some water getting in. That's the real issue. There's a leak that we just need to fix. Well, actually, I found an old tile laying in the yard, and kind of go and you slide it back into place, and that stops the presenting issue is plaster falling off the wall, but the real issue is that there's tiles missing and the roof needs to be replaced. And, so in the same way with the church, there's always a root issue, or maybe there's several. And so as a process, what we do is we have a process that we simply want to ask the church, what is the Spirit saying to this church? And then we want to do that. And so as part of that process, we have we call it a discernment process, or, as my wife's a GP. So, there's a lot of similarities to, going to see your GP, or that diagnostic that a GP might do with a patient. I'm going in, it hurts here. And so the GP is going to just ask some questions or do some examination to find out, well, why? Because once we know why it's hurting, then, there's a course of treatment that can be put into place that might be very different depending on whether you've pulled a muscle, torn a ligament, or overuse, or there's a tumor growing in there, right? So it can be very different. So in the same way with church, so we have a diagnostic process we go through a church that involves like an online survey. It involves, taking a team of people that could go in to do interviews. Now these days we're using, because, we're restricted on face-to-face contact, we can use, Zoom or other platforms to do one-on-one interviews. And we ask questions. And so the online survey is well over like 100 questions, everything from just demographics to theological to, looking forward to what, they hope the church is and can be. And that generates a report that's about 150 to 125 to 150 pages of data that then we take into an interview process where we can interview one-on-one key leaders and any congregants that would like to have a conversation. And our team then, through just it's just a group discernment process, are really asking, well, what are we hearing? What are we listening to? And what is we keep wanting to ask, what's the systemic issue? What's the root issue of where the church is at the moment? And then we kind of talk about this as a mirror and a roadmap. So it's not our evaluation of a church. Like, what do we know, right? All we're doing is reflecting back to the church what it has said to us. So we reflect back to them what they are saying, and then maybe give some recommendations on, like, here is usually we're looking for one root, maybe 2 or 3 branch issues, and then we'll give a series of recommendations accordingly on, like, so if there's conflict is maybe the root issue, then there may be some recommendations directly associated with how to, as a church, work through, deal with, appropriately work through biblically conflict, which Christians are terrible at, by the way.
Yes.
And that, because you deal with the conflict, then there's some symptoms of conflict, but we may need to retrain everybody in the church on how to biblically deal with conflict in a way that not only honors each other, but also honors God.
Yeah.
And so if we do that, which takes time and
Yes.
it's hard work. And for those of us that love to avoid conflict, that might be the last thing we want to hear. We'd much rather just go to a different church, where, of course, there
Yes.
all those other churches where no conflict ever happens. And we think that everything will just go away. So, and so whatever the symptoms are, we kind of try to discern what the root issue is. And so that's the beginning of the process. And then if they want to take it a step further and would like to invite us in as an intentional interim, then the recommendations just become our job description. And so we come in as a pastor of the church, and then we're not consultants. So we're not just picking scabs and pointing at issues and, hey, good luck with this. But we're pastors at hearts. We have pastor heart. We love people. And so we want to pastor and lead the church through the process of dealing with those issues. And we want to come on site and do that intimately with people as we seek the Spirit, seek God, and allow the gospel to do the work of reconciling a church back to Him.
So you're going through this forensic process, and it sounds like a forensic process, right? Because you're basically saying you've been approached with a problem. You've got this almost like it sounds like a personality type, Myers-Briggs type breakdown of questions and responses that will lead you ultimately to a distillation, which permits you to diagnose what you perceive the problems to be. Once you present a church with that, or even before you've presented it, there must be occasions when people recognize that they're about to be found out, that there are toxicities that people know are going to be exposed, but they really aren't ready or desiring to rectify or deal with, actually. And when people are in those situations, we both know they react quite badly. They can react with volatility, with passion, upset, and anger. Is that true? Is that an experience that you have encountered? Is that something that you'd recognize what I've just described there or not?
It certainly can happen, for sure. I think miraculously, and I think because the Spirit is involved in this, I think, in this whole process, we don't, like, a lot, we get kind of accused that this is, you're just bringing a business model of, outside consultancy come to assess us. But really what we see is that I think Paul would have used an online survey if he had one, right? Going, sending Titus into Crete. I think he would have loved, Titus would have loved to have had this kind of discernment opportunity. But really, like, even looking at Revelation chapter 2 and 3, his letters to the church, and each of those letters bring a element of affirmation of what is going well in the church and what is good, and then also rebuke. And here are areas or blind spots
Mm.
that need to be dealt with. And so we really, um, our prayer and our hope is that kind of in a similar way, or if we were to ask the question, if Jesus was to walk through your church, to come to a Sunday service, to walk through your kids ministry, uh, what would he say? What would his affirmation of what what is going well and what is doing good, and also what are the issues that need to be dealt with? Um, how we would respond to that. Um, I think we're generally surprised. Oftentimes, there's people in the church that can't wait. Like we've been dealing these. There's an elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about
Yeah.
and hasn't been addressed. And so finally, there's this. They're hoping and they're praying that someone will finally say, "This needs to finally be dealt with." Oftentimes, by the time that we come onto the scene, there's oftentimes a lot of the really toxic people have already things have blown up to the level where those folks have already left, or we're kind of often dealing with the fallout.
Mm.
But when we report back, you're like, well, oftentimes, like after we've done the report and before they get the final written report, we'll meet with the leadership and we'll get to share with them, and then we meet with the congregation and we get to report back to them. And one of the things we do want to come across very much so is part of that affirmation. Here's where you guys are killing it. Here's where you guys are doing great, because it's those areas of strength that they're going to be able to leverage moving forward into the future.
Mhm.
But then, we want to be truth tellers. We want to speak truth in love, right? And so we want to do that in a way that isn't just, oftentimes it's done with emotion. I know I've seen some of our guys, they weep as they say these things. And so it's not accusatory, because we know we're works in progress. We're imperfect. We're sinners saved by grace. And so we kind of come from that humble perspective and know that going through this process is hugely humbling. And so when we do present it, because it's not what we're saying, we're reflecting back to the church what it has said.
Yeah.
Then it usually lands with if there needs to be conviction, it usually lands with a humble conviction of that you as a church have allowed this to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and now you're faced with an opportunity, a real gospel opportunity, a real God-sent opportunity to really do something about it.
Yeah.
And so that is generally, not always, but that's generally how it's received. That it's really kind of it can feel like that you get the wind taken out of you, but done in a way that is loving and caring, and that there is a way forward. There's
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. I discern in your answer that the question, actually, the thing that I was alluding to about the people cutting and going when they realize the big bright torch is coming, actually happens at the point when the church make the decision collectively to bring in your team. Actually, they would likely flee at that point if they're going to, because actually what you're left with are the persons who desperately desire for healing to come. Probably, I would imagine, just at the announcement that your intervention is going to happen, it's the threat of the big torch that's going to shine a light in the dark places. Actually, that would be the point at which I would think long before you come with your diagnosis. So yeah, that I think that's makes a lot of sense from what you just said.
And oftentimes like if there's the one or two power brokers or something in a church, that oftentimes they're the voice that is preventing the process from happening to begin with. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that they can be the ones that are wanting to maintain control, and so a sense of having someone come alongside or is a losing of that control. which is one of the unholy trinity that we see going into churches, right? Is one of those, along with idolatry, conflict, and misuse, abuse, or lack of use of power.
Mm.
Is those
But,
three kind of make up the unholy trinity of a church. And so
mm,
that power, people wanting more power, people not using the authority that they have, or misuse of that authority, is often one of the things. And so a lot of times those issues, like you say, that church might experience is actually before we get there. They may prevent us from coming in. Now, having said that, it's not uncommon for us, maybe during the interview process, that maybe there's a name or a family that keeps their name kind of keeps being brought up, and maybe not a healthy or positive way. And so, either myself or somebody from our team, some of the leaders on our team, we may have to sit down and during our interview with them, have a help me understand conversation. Just,
mhm.
help me understand why, like, because we want to listen. We're not like, help me understand why your name keeps coming up associated with this issue. And we want to hear from them, and we want to hear their heart and listen and see. But it's also not to have some difficult and challenging conversations with people within the church if there's a toxicity or issues that, because if church discipline is another, that's an area that churches sometimes don't do well. And so if there's sin that needs to be addressed, and we kind of need to have those conversations of like, this behavior is not going to be acceptable moving forward any longer, and there's going to need to be some changes. Sometimes that conversation has to be had, and those aren't fun conversations, but
No.
and then how people respond. Sometimes they just like forget this, they write the nasty letter and they leave, or they choose to make some changes, and they come to understand, and we'll love them and serve them through a process of restoration, which is
Mhm.
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful when that happens.
I guess occasionally, if you've got a very artful manipulator of a culture, they might in fact be the persons or clique that actually actively appoint you and then seek to shape your response to the situation. That would be an obvious tactic, I can imagine, if they're particularly insidious in the way in which they operate within the structure of an organization or a church or a fellowship. So it's a fascinating work. I can imagine there'll be no end of it, sadly, because as we know, and as you said, I've never, well, frankly, when I moved to Scotland, I couldn't believe I opened a coffee shop as a way of meeting people, and I was, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'd been involved with the house church movement and moved to Scotland, and there was no fellowship, and I was at that point kind of anti-denominational. I'm not joining a denomination. But I thought, well, I do need to connect, and I do need to network, and I do need to meet people. And I opened a small coffee shop, and my first customer was the wife of a pastor, who through, and the long and the short of that is that I now have a son-in-law and 4 grandsons from that coffee shop. So it definitely did the job. But what struck me early on when I started to meet Christians from various different worship styles and fellowships was just how many were delighting, not delighting, that's the wrong word, but they would waste no time in telling you how they had been hurt. It was almost, and I thought because that wasn't the language of the people that I had met through the house church movement. It was a case of, if you've got a hurt, then you're either holding on to a fire that will burn your clothes, which you should, or you're carrying a burden which is not yours to carry, so drop it. It was very straightforward, but I couldn't believe the amount of people that were carrying these hurts and wearing them like badges of honor.
Yeah.
It was a striking thing to me when I moved here. And I had that coffee shop in 2004. So that ties in very neatly with your own history
Yeah.
and journey in Scotland as well. Um, I don't know really why I'm saying that, other than that I can understand and I think appreciate just the depth and the breadth potentially of this work. And it sounds like a healing work. So it sounds like a really, really important thing to be doing, and a fascinating thing to be doing, especially if you're interested in human behavior and spiritual development of people within the Christian tradition, which I am. So
Yeah.
I think we could probably talk about that forever. But one of the things I want to ask you, though, as you know, is from what you've seen in your experiences of the Scottish churches that you've been involved in particular around Glasgow, and of course England as well, like you said, and agencies like the Glasgow City Mission, of which there are a number all over the world. Any kind of parachurch thing, though I'm not fond of the word parachurch, but it doesn't matter. People know what it means. Is the tension as to what our role is in the context of the local churches, whether we are a church, whether we are a facilitator and an enabler to the local church, whether we are an equipping agency for the local church, or whether we are an outsourced agency of people with relative expertise who deal with the sort of people that the local church is ill-equipped to deal with, or all of the above. But this is a kind of this is a question that's sort of gnawing away at me at the moment, because people do want to know. There are people on the staff, in the volunteer team, certainly of our guest cohort, who find us to be the place where they feel safe to say pray, to be prayed for, to divulge their deep histories, their personal stories, their tragedies, their brokenness and their woes, their sins and their guilt and their confessions. It can also be the place we found more and more where people would rather do their worship in the context of Glasgow City Mission than perhaps in their own fellowship. And what I'm personally cautious of is actually drawing people away from fellowships that are impoverished already in many instances. And I don't further want to weaken them, rather we want to strengthen. So there is a tension between doing what we do well because people through the Spirit are drawn to us, but at the same time supporting and enhancing the offering of the local church in the context of Glasgow and not undermining it. So I guess, interestingly, what the CEO is now asking Wade Thompson is, what's your take on some of that? If you're able to give me anything on that.
I think it's such a great question. And we started a little bit of this conversation I think I was peeling potatoes or something like that. And I think you were cutting up pastry for dessert, or for the vegetarian option for the dinner yesterday,
which was delicious.
Yes. And I've been thinking about it. And interestingly, I think that, and I think just off camera, when we started, I asked a little bit about your history, and you're talking a little bit about your history coming from a kind of a house church that was maybe more literal and fundamental to moving towards being okay with tension, theological tension, reality, all these things that we feel like as we experience and as we read through the Bible, that it feels like God holds some things in tension. And so that, like, we're those of us that want there to be more black and white, there tends to be some more tension. And I wonder, and this may be a complete cop-out answer, is that in some of the things that you're wrestling with, is that there's some tension there. And that I think the answer to some of those questions is yes. Like it can be and is all of those things. I think, as much as we see in the New Testament the formation of the church, we also have Paul have teams of people that are going out, and apostolic teams that are going out and doing ministry, and no doubt that they're tethered to sending churches. Paul certainly was, but he had Timothy and Titus and others that were going and to other areas to teach and train and develop and to, challenge and revitalize. And so I think it's just some amazing questions that that the city mission is wrestling with, and I certainly can identify with. I've never felt so missional in many ways, as a believer and follower of Jesus, as my involvement in the city mission. And as amazing as my home church is or was, they didn't have the capacity, the expertise, or the resources to be able to do the type of ministry that the city mission does. And so, so as a church, we consciously says, we know that we're not going to be able to do this as well as the city mission. So how about we as a church, we give our resource, some resource, time, and people, energy. This past weekend, there was, an announcement for people in our church to volunteer for a shift for the night shelter and things like that. And so, as a church, we're a church that I'm pretty proud of, and is maybe a bigger church in Glasgow, but it's never, we're a long ways off from having the ability or the resource to provide, housing for, something like the night shelter is able to do, like you guys are able to do. So knowing that, so you are a resource. So we'll help, how can we come alongside you and help you guys do what you do? So I think there's definitely a place for a team of people like yourselves that are concentrating on this issue and providing this avenue. For people that are maybe in it's real easy for, I think I don't like the word parachurch either, but I think, there's student organizations that work in universities and things that wrestle with some of these same issues, that they see themselves as something separate in a lot of ways from, they don't want to be the church, if you will, but yet they have students that this is where they fellowship, this is where they are growing, and so they may not necessarily be connected to another church. And so
let me just interject here.
Sure.
I feel like we should clarify the distinction in language, even though probably for the most part it would be Christian people listening to this, if anybody. But that I would want us to make the distinction between when I say, let's say, the city mission becoming a church. Of course, we are the church because where two or more are gathered. So I want to make that very clear. I don't have any misunderstanding of that. I'm also very strong adherent to the idea of the priesthood of all believers. So I take that very seriously in terms of those that contribute and participate in what we do. I think so the distinction is between, yes, we are the church, but we don't want to become another fellowship constituted like in the way that people understand the church to be. So we are the gathered, we are the ecclesia, but we are not necessarily a new denomination or a church plant at this stage. And that would be a distinction I'd want to make clear, if that's made it clear. I don't know. Probably not.
Well, I mean, and I think that comes down to, I think what, people are really wrestling with at the moment, theologically, the thinkers out there, is like, how do we define church? What is, church? And it's really interesting even now in the era of COVID and so many churches going online. I know that those churches that began that trend back 10, 12 years ago or longer, where they were really pushing the online church experience, that there was a lot of pushback against that no way is that, the church, or that you can do church virtually. And yet, here we are 10 years ago now. So thankful for those pioneers that have done that, because that is what the church, all churches around the world in so many ways are experiencing, fellowship, worship. So I think it's worth that conversation. And it's one that I think people are having, is how do we define what is church, organized or otherwise, or new expression. And I think for you guys, like, I don't know that there's a wrong answer. I think I feel like wrestling with that and defining the most important thing would be defining what you are, and then moving forward with that and being okay with it. And having a vision for that. But but likewise, I can completely understand how it would be a difficult situation to be in, because you tick so many of the boxes in all of those camps. And people experience a lot of those things in those camps. And so it would be really easy to go one way or the other. Or I guess the challenge would be then is to not spread yourselves too thin and then become too you can become like, well, now we're going to become, so now we're going to start doing all of these other things. And so
missional creep. Yeah.
You diverge from what the city mission was, the focus, the purpose of what the mission has done. I can see on your sign since 1826, so it's been pretty focused on one thing for a long time, and rightly so. There's still a need, more so than ever. And so
I suppose my heart for this is that I personally don't actually have a massive issue with it, because we do worship, right? We do mentor, we do discipleship, we do feed, we do give glass of water, we do clothe the cold, we do the things. And a large, and I would say, hopefully not too pridefully, that a lot of the goodwill towards Glasgow City Mission is based around the fact that the world looking on sees that what we're doing looks like the thing they heard about in primary school that Jesus done, and think, yeah, I recognize Jesus in that. And that makes people happy, even if they're not adherents to the faith, right? They just like to see people doing the thing that they know that their exemplar did.
Yeah.
And that has a massive and profound impact on people, not only our supporters, but also for the people that look to us for their support. So if we could provide a place of acknowledged and more formal fellowship and church center for them, that would be fine. But I know for a fact what would also happen is numbers of our supporters and our volunteers and our staff would choose to affiliate to any church that we established, that we did, in preference to the one that they already belong to, you see. And so my concern is not that we offer what we offer to the people we offer it to, because I recognize that we could do that in a way that others can't, even in the language we use and the method of approach, person to person. But my concern is that, you will know this for a fact, that 90% of the work in any church is done by about 5% of the people, the boosters, the real doers. And those same people probably, I'm imagining, constitute the people that come volunteer for us, because they're people driven by the mission of the Missio Dei, and they're motivated people, they're doers. And I desperately don't want us to be seen to be impoverishing local churches by creating a venue that they would want to come to.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, ask away.
So why would you be worried about impoverishing a church that potentially is impoverishing its people?
So part of me, so there here we have a tension, because this whole thing, COVID, the decline of traditional forms of worship, the rise of the church plant model, the phenomenon of the celebrity pastor, the preeminence of the praise band superstar leader, and all of the glitz and glamour that goes with it. My concern that, and this is potentially leads us down a terrible rabbit hole, but
I know. I,
my
I,
concern
that's
about
why the
all.
long pause. I wasn't sure. I wanted to ask
No, I know.
it makes
Well,
me
you've done
nervous.
it
It makes me a
now.
little sweaty just asking the
Yeah.
question.
Well, good. Well, and so we can sweat together.
Okay.
My concern about that phenomenon and that movement is that, yes, we stand on the shoulders of the people that went before us who are faithfully adhering to traditional forms. Whilst we stand on their shoulders, we poke them in the eye and beat them on the head, and we say we're going to set up a new thing that looks nothing like the old thing, because whilst I appreciate the boost up, I'm going to kick you in the face because you weren't doing it as good or as well.
Yeah.
Now, the question does, though, persist, and it's a truth that by natural processes and accelerated, I think, by lockdown and COVID, that which was withering on the vine is being, that its decline is being hastened. And we have probably, I would imagine, when we come through this during the middle of 2021, God willing, we will see that there will be great numbers of small fellowships that would not be reconstituting themselves, either through a concern around risk and contagion and dwindling numbers and age profile and the appointment of a new minister or whatever it's going to be. There will be many reasons why lots of fellowships won't make it. And it could just be that some of the people that I'm talking about are in those places, and we may just present to them a new home if we did such a thing. Possible. And in a way, we've got what's happening over the course of the de-Christianization of and the secularization of the United Kingdom has hastened the decline of traditional forms. We are post-authoritarian culture. We are a relativist culture. We don't accept what we're told. And we all believe that we can construct. We're all constructivists. We think we can construct the new society. We think we can construct the new ideology. We think we can construct the new version of church. But what we do is we create little ghettos of confirmation bias, where you reflect me back at me. I'm going to wear a flannel shirt and you wear a flannel shirt, and I'll grow a beard, you grow a beard, and we're just going to be handsome together, and we're going to affirm each other in that handsomeness. And you end up with a ghetto, and you think that you reflect the corpus, the full body. You don't. You reflect a very narrow channel. And actually what we're losing potentially in the death of the former older modes of worship and gathering is a very much more Catholic version of what faith expression looks like. Where young and old and rich and poor and male and female and foreigner and stranger and alien all come together, and they look like something like the universality of the gospel. But what's happening is, like a lot of things, the Bray head effect. You whack up a Bray head and you kill off the diversity of all of the regional centers. And so this is a very much bigger conversation than and it leads to lots of other smaller conversations. But I think you must recognize what I'm describing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm just trying to work out where worship and with Glasgow City Mission fits into the context of that change.
Yeah.
And some of the change I recognize is natural, and some of it is very, very good, but some of it is the unintended consequence will be that you lose something of value that you didn't realize you were losing until it's too late. You've lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, obviously there's a, within the context of church, and kind of address maybe a couple of the issues or things that some of the folks that you interact with. Obviously there's an issue of the consumerism idea of church, where you will have a percentage of people that will just move from church to church seeking the newest and best thing. As you say, well, that preaching's good, or the worship is really great here, or whatever, or I can go to this church because it's bigger and I can just bleed into the background and no one will notice me and I can tick my church box and be okay. Multitude of reasons why people kind of shift and change. And my recognition here, as being part of a church plant team, we had several churches that, when we planted in Glasgow, that, there were some folks that were really publicly against, churches that were publicly against what we were trying to do, as if, we've got it sorted. We have this area, kind of covered. But you just do the math, where our church was in the west end of Glasgow. There's 100,000 people live in Glasgow. There's over 65,000 students attending university in Glasgow from all over the world. And if you just add up all the loosely based evangelical Christians, if you will, you could all stick them into the local, the SECC, concert venue. It's such a tiny portion. You do the math of how many people attend a church where they're probably going to hear the gospel preached in the west end of Glasgow. It's going to be, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 out of 100,000 just in the west end. Like, my perception is like there's space for some more churches. I mean, you could plop, if tomorrow you could have a mega church with 3,000 people, I mean, you'd say, wow, that's amazing. But in comparison to 100,000 people in this community, if you will, it's a tiny fraction of the population. And so you'll have people that will kind of move, but then you also potentially have people that are in churches who are, like I think you mentioned earlier, that read the Gospels, read the life of Jesus, and see the commission of the church to be, preaching the gospel, baptizing, making disciples, and engaging the least of these in our community. And they're thirsty for that, and they want to see that. And maybe their church isn't able, isn't willing. Maybe it's not healthy. And so kind of seeing it from the perspective of, like, maybe throwing the why are the people leaving your church? Why are the people, like, what is it? Why are they leaving your family? Why isn't there a stickiness within a particular fellowship that they're so easily fleeing or going somewhere else? And I think with the types of the volunteers that I know and have engaged with the city mission, is that a lot of those people are maybe just really thirsty for an expression of faith that has action to it. And they're sitting in a church that, that maybe has gotten stuck. And we're being very generalized, and I don't want to throw situations, and I'm not thinking of anything in particular, but maybe there's an uneasiness with what their experience of what's happening in their local church isn't matching up with what their heart is saying, what they're thirsty and hungry for, and what they see Jesus commissioning us to be and do. And so they're having that outlet with an organization like the City Mission, or the multitude of other opportunities that are abound wherever their heart may align. And so, I'm, in one way, I love the church and want it vital, but I'm also a big fan of people being and engaging in mission and the church in a way that allows them to flourish and to grow in their intimacy with Christ. And so in there somewhere, there's some difficult, probably, conversations, but also I want to put some onus back onto the church, on those that see people leaving, and maybe that I know, and out with COVID has a multitude of other potential issues, but we as churches need to take a hard look at ourselves and start asking the question, why are people, why are folks dropping away, and what are the reasons that is that a symptom of something that's potentially deeper? I just kind of reflecting on this the other day, because I think it came up in some of our conversations yesterday. And my mother has always had horses, and we've had some land back in Arkansas. And I remember a few years back, a lot of years back, but my mom's horses are always struggling with being too fat. She overfeeds, but she rides them, and they exercise, they work, and she but loves and cares for those horses. Just on the other side of the fence, whoever the owner was of that property had a couple, mules, I think, that were out there that were, they were skinny. They were they looked unhealthy. And she was constantly throwing hay and feed over the fence, because whoever they belonged to, weren't being cared for in a way that was appropriate. And even when she had the farrier come, and she would sneak their horses out, those mules out to get some care that they needed, and then kind of usher them back into the paddock. But I think that sometimes we can look at it like, oh, well, I feel a little guilty about doing that, but let's put some onus on whoever owns that other fold, and say, like, you have a responsibility. Scripture says we have a responsibility to care for and to operate in a way that is engaging in our communities, and making disciples within our community that is that honors God. And sometimes we fall short of that, and that's true for all of our churches have blind spots in those areas, and it's something that we're continuing to try to grow and to do. So so I guess I just say that not to be too hard on yourselves.
No.
But they're great questions to be asking as you guys continue to try to just.
I think what we want to avoid is
where
not,
you land.
it's not being hard on ourselves at all. Really, it's just trying to be sensitive to the context, and to properly understand our place and our role within the broader context of the church to which we serve, and to whom we would hope to continue to be a resource, if not in even greater ways going forward. That would be my hope. Of course, I mean, but I do think there is scope for us to be certainly offering some form of city centre recovery service, and then just see where it goes from there. But we'll see about that. Certainly there have been conversations about that kind of thing, going forward. So if you were to throw your hat in the ring in its entirety with the Glasgow City Mission, if that was a thing, this is a kind of what if thing.
Sure.
What one area would you consider would be your focus? Would be an area that you think, right, I definitely want to tackle that? Or
probably the scope would probably be discipleship, mentorship. I think discipleship, discipleship starts pre-conversion, pre-following, it's that engaging with. And so I think it would be with, young men. I guess the older I get, the less hip and trendy I think I am, but but engaging with men and helping them to know their true identity, because I think that and doing that on more of a one-on-one, connecting, going deeper with a few men to help them understand who God has created them to be. Because I think they have been thrust into a world that tells them that they are a multitude of things that is not godly, and I think that the world is they live in a world that is tough, and I can't even wrap my head around some of the experiences that they've had. But to help them truly understand their God-given identity and come to realize that, and to ultimately see them, become intimate followers of Jesus would be and I know that that is just so much of the heart of what the city mission is. And I think that if I was to throw my ring in, my hat in and say like, that's what I would like to give my time to, that would be it. That would be
Okay.
it.
So it's a very
Totally happy
time.
peeling. And if right now peeling potatoes and helping out in the kitchen best facilitates that, then like I'm really having a good time doing that as well.
Well, everyone's only got so many hours in a week, and
Yeah.
you give of your time, and you have done over the course of a long period of time, wonderfully generously. So we wouldn't expect too much of you. And the one-on-one type casework that you're talking about, the mentoring, the personal discipleship, throwing that level of emotional and spiritual and time resource into human beings who through the course of their lives and the tragedy of many of their lives have become by their nature almost black holes of resources, financial, time, all of it, public, expert, just black holes of resources. What you're talking about is entirely at the heart of many of our workers' work, as you know, but it is extremely time consuming. And you actually, if you can actually only do that with so many individuals.
Sure.
And so in terms of investment of time, it has an eternal reward. We believe in Jesus' name, in faith, an essential one, because many of us are only here because somebody that professes what you've just done has done that on our behalf, poured into us, wasted, broken people, and said, actually, I see something of value in there. And we're thankful for it. And that's an amazing thing to hear from you. So, yeah, we bear that in mind. Hopefully, if everyone listening to this, if the job comes up, then we've got Wade's number, right? That's that's what we got. Well, listen, I've taken up a fair chunk of your time now, which I appreciate greatly, very much indeed. And no doubt in the future, we'll continue to chat while you're peeling your potatoes or whatever it is you do. By the way, the peeling of potatoes thing, that is a ministry that you may know, is close to my heart. Many of the best conversations I've ever had with human beings have been putting them to work on cutting up a tray of onions or a punnet of onions.
Absolutely.
Because in those immersive practices, people start to talk. It's like with my son. If I want to talk to my son, you can't talk to him face to face. I've got to get him in the car because he can't. He knows I'm not looking into his eyes, but he'll start talking, and I'll hear his heart then.
Yeah.
So the potatoes are a great place to be.
Well, even just, like yesterday, there's a young man in the kitchen that was helping us out. And, we were making the sauce to put on the, Ewan's special sauce. And so
Special gravy.
the special gravy. And so, the next service was coming around and we had to try to replicate it. And so I did one, and then I literally badgered this young fella he didn't want to do it. He didn't, afraid or for whatever reason, I just kind of badgered him into doing it. But seeing him pull it off, and it was every bit as good as, the next one. I was like, okay, you've watched one, you've done one, now you got to teach one. And so when there was a shift change to then let him kind of talk about how, like, this is how this, this is the most important part of it. This is how you got to make this sauce. And so, like, just to see that little step of like not thinking that they were maybe able to do it or whatever, to see them then pull it off. And now, hey, now you know how to make the second secret sauce next year if we need it made. That's that little spark, that little.
Yeah. Well, you've imputed value.
It's so much fun. It's so much fun.
A lot of the guys, that have come through, at the risk of going on now much longer. A lot of the guys that come through, in my experience, well, just in life generally, actually, is that a lot of the people that we meet have been left behind at some point, and they put on this kind of ego front, which is a protection mechanism against being found out by the world. I tattoo my face because I want to look tough, but actually inside I just needed cuddled. I needed cuddle from my mum. I needed my dad to tell me I was all right, you know. And you wear a hoodie and you wear it up because you don't want anyone to mess with you, because you're signaling out that you're not to be messed with, but actually inside you're just terrified. You don't want confrontation, you know. And a lot of the people that will come into a kitchen setting like yours now, they're frightened to do a task because the task will oblige them to potentially be judged and critiqued, and they would do anything but feel that awful feeling of inadequacy and failure, you know. And they specialized in avoiding stepping up to any plate for fear of rejection, of someone highlighting their weakness. And there's no emotional safety in that. There's no affirmation in that. There's no sense of you're a person made in the image of God, and you're wonderfully made and cared for and loved and known. And when you do a small thing like teach someone how to make a basic sauce, and they probably go home and make it to death till they're sick of it, but it might become a pasta sauce, and they might throw in some smoked salmon, and they might make some spaghetti and go with it. And you know, you just don't know where it might end, right? But it's these small things that are so crucial.
Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
discipleship, right? Well, thank you very much, Wade. Really, 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 really appreciate this. And
Thanks for having me. It was good fun.
yeah, I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.